Yo, yo, yo. It's your guy, a 5 minute or less review, coming to you live with another episode of, you guessed it, just talking about things on the internet. So I was basically perusing through the internet when I came across this video on Tanya Tiko's channel. And I think this is kind of applicable to almost every other person, be it for the Spanish, for Africans, or for anybody that is outside of the US coming into this country and seeing what is going on. And I just want to just give an honest reaction to this video because sparks were flying and I was like, wow, I gotta talk about this. So, so the main thing about it is for us to just allow her to speak for a little while and then I'll give one or two comments on the issue. Hopefully. Alright, guys. It's showtime.
As I was editing this video, I realized, listen, the only reason why your black ass would be able to come over to America and be able to do anything is because of the hard work, the blood, the sweat, the fighting, and the dedication of African Americans who on this soil changed this land. African Americans are the ones who got this country integrated. Let me explain something to you.
My dear, you don't need to explain. Yes, you're right. They did a lot. They fought hard. Anybody who's watched the documentaries, read the books, man, they did a lot. They fought because they still had that African blood in them. Okay? They're fighters. Real fighters. They fought for what they believed in. Right? They saw the opportunity. They had people who were go-getters and they went out and they did a lot of things. And one thing you have to understand is that during this time in which they were fighting, they had one thing that was working for them. One very important thing. And that was, to some degree, culture. Okay? They had families. They had nuclear families. They had structure. That's one of the most important things you have to always understand. There was structure between the man and the woman. They understood their own place. They knew what they were about to do. There was respect. There was eating around the table. There was respect. That's one of the most important things you have to always understand. In as much as they had gone through the slavery, they were going through discrimination. And let me put it like this for you. When people are going through all of that, they tend to come together. When there's a binding force between people, people tend to stick together and they are much more stronger when there's a common enemy to fight. Now that that is gone, you can begin to see some of those strings loosen. And in as much as we're going to sit down here and talk about this issue, but anyway, let me just keep quiet and let her speak.
White people in this country did not give us anything. We have had to take. And this is why you see what is going on in the news and the media right now. We took in the 1960s what it is that we had. We took their lynchings, their terrorizing, their burning down of our neighborhoods, and we continue to rebuild and rebuild and revisit and retwist and re-rise up what it is that we have done in this country. And the only reason why anybody can bring their black ass over here from another mother effing country is because what black Americans have done on this land. And I'm saying this as a person who is bicultural, whose father is not American, doggone it. My father is an immigrant, and he was able to come over to this country and do something in this country because of the black people who fought, who died, who bled, who were lynched on this land.
And she's right. And she is right. The sacrifices made by those heroes, the sacrifices that were made and continuously made, the risk that many of those families, men, women, children of African descent had to take, even when they were being shot, shunned, strangled, hanged, and so many other things. They kept pushing. And personally, I think that that kind of energy is needed, in my personal opinion, in Africa. You need people like that who are willing to push past the government and say, we will overcome, we will no longer continue to take your crap. We are the people. The government is supposed to serve us. If only many places in Africa and African people can actually stand up and rise and fight like many of the African Americans that fought in this country for what they believed was their right, I think Africa in itself can be set on the right path. I mean, sure, we're going to have a lot of, in Africa, there's going to be a lot of problems, initially, but eventually, since you already have fighters and people already know they're going to shed blood for what they believe in order to set their own society on the right path, I assure you, any country can get back to where it needs to be if you have the right people who are fighting for it, But you just need to have to make sure that they're not fanatics who end up being in government, because fanatics don't make good government leaders. All right, moving on.
So don't sit your black ass over there in some other goddamn country talking about what you would do in America. The only reason why your black ass could even get the... Listen to what it is that I'm saying. That exists inside of the average Nigerian that I spoke to had a complacency and a docility that exists in there when it comes to their government. And then, right?
But then here's the situation a lot of African Americans don't understand, is that they always think that it's only them that actually made America what it is. They forget that there are also some whites who help push many things on the other side. You see, you can sit down here and you can fight as much as you want to fight against the system and do whatever you want to do and be stubborn and all that whole stuff. If the white people on the other side were not convinced that the discrimination needed to stop, it would have continued. So let's not sit down here and lay it on the moral that only black people actually are fighting for their freedom and equality. Many white people had already started this process too, that wanted you to have your freedom. In as much as some people would say that Lincoln wasn't, in as much as he said, he was talking about equality. And the only reason why he was given that opportunity was because a war was at his own doorstep and he wanted the North to have a little bit more people to fight off the South in order for him to do what he did, yes, strategically. And even though, let's just say that he also held on to his slaves a little bit longer than he should have, but still, let's look at it. Back in those days, you needed people who are going to be able to labor for you too. And there's nothing nicer than free labor. If he had charged it to other people, well, guess what? He was already broke by then. Things were not happening well for him too. So he needed his free labor to get himself together also. He cannot leave his family just like that and then start hiring other people when he hasn't got the juice to move forward yet. So the main thing I'm trying to say is that a lot of the white people also made it possible because they themselves, some of them were also against slavery. And they were tired of treating other people less than subpar. And they themselves were fighting, and black people were also rebelling and fighting too. And as a result of that, both sides ended up getting freedom and benefits for what would appear to be good for the community. But I think to some degree, the ending of segregation, to a certain degree, I'm not saying it was a good thing, I'm not saying it was a bad thing, but the ending of it to some degree without having African Americans actually have a common ground, a common enemy that they need to fight, actually caused them more harm than good. Because when you don't have something that you fear anymore, you're no longer tight with your unit anymore. You just go anyhow. Like, let's say if we drop you and 5 people, in a very hostile territory, you guys will be on alert. You guys will work together almost like a full body in order to make sure that nothing happens to any of you guys. The same thing was also happening to a lot of the African Americans. This is why you can see they were strong back in those days. fought no matter what the situation was, because they understood it's either either we live together or we die together, one way or the other, but we're going to make sure that this situation happens. There was strength. I don't think the environment was good, but hey, there was strength, and that strength needed to be carried to the next generation. Unfortunately, that's not what is happening in this new generation.
Nerve, the nerve of anyone to suggest that because of the type of trauma that you experience in your country, the type of brainwashing that you exist in your country is different than the type of trauma and brainwashing that we have existed in this country, that somehow that makes you better? No. Part of the reason that Nigeria looks the way that it is right now is because Europeans ran roughshod over that country. Europeans ran roughshod over Nigeria.
And I have to say, and then I have to disagree with what she just said right now. That's not the reason why the country is the way it is. The country is the way it is because the country, when the Europeans came into it, they destabilized the people in the way they normally do things. And the people, as a result of that, try to adopt many of the European ways of doing things. And as a result of that, when you adopt something that is off of your own beaten track, well, guess what? You no longer have the connection back to a lot of things that you're supposed to be doing. And I believe that's the same thing that happened with the African Americans when they came over to the United States. They were taken away from what they had known into a new environment and forced into a so-called environment that they were not accustomed to. A lot of people also forget that many of the African Americans back in those days, they were coming from all these other places. Probably were either poor or they were newly conquered. There was a lot of wars in Africa back in those days, so most likely they were either royalty or to some degree maybe people who were serving maybe a royal family or whatever it is that was just newly conquered, a new area that was just newly conquered, stuff like that. And rather than just putting all the people there to waste or to kill all of them, you just carry all of them and just make some money in the process, get some new dollar bills by sending them overseas. Number one, you don't get to disrupt the people of the land, or you don't get to cause some kind of a problem with their ancestors. Sometimes in certain places in Africa, when you go around killing other people, you tend to put the ancestors' wrath on the new people, But in this way, you transfer that ancestry wrath over to the white man. And again, you don't get to see them again. So that's the main idea of selling many of the people who were conquered back in those days. Or maybe people who were poor, or they just had no, or just anything that they could just lay their hands on, they would just carry those people and just give them to the Dutch. I think it was the Dutch that were coming around during that time. And they just give them to the Dutch, and then the Dutch would then send them away. It's no different from what the Jews were doing with giving their own people over to certain Arabian people that were coming through their own lands, and they would just sell them off as slaves because, hey, they committed a sin or they committed something that were off, and then you just, that way you don't put the wrath of God on your hands by saying you killed your own brother or you judged your own brother. You might as well just give them to the Arabians. Let the Arabians go and sell them maybe in Egypt, or sell them to some other place again back in those days where they were building a lot of things. So the same thing applies here, when it comes to the Africans themselves, is that they were displaced to a certain degree, and then you had the African community that was creating this Afro whatever that was happening during that period, and there was a lot of threats to the British distant. As a result of that, they had to start trying to lay power back. Now, guess what happens when you try to give power back to people, but the people that you're giving power back to don't really understand how to really rule a country, because here they are trying to adopt a system that was not really meant for them. And as a result of that, what's going to happen to them? They're going to fall. That's why the country's economy, although it was tied to the British initially with the pounds and the naira, they were almost hand in hand to a very initial start. And then before you know it, the naira started falling apart. based on corruption, mismanagement, and so on and so forth. It was almost as if they bred them just to fail, because they knew that they didn't really understand what they were dealing with. I mean, if you look at the Nigerian uh, political sphere, you find out that it's over bloated. They're using the so-called presidential way of ruling when you don't even have that much to rule. I don't even know why you have that kind of a bloated system, and that bloated system often leads to, increase in corruption and places for corruption to hide and so on and so forth, which gives a lot of problems. And then, like she said, there's a lot of docility when it comes to the political system, which basically people all they do is just open their mouth and blame, 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 blame. But when it's time to shed some blood and do some action, everybody wants to sit to the side. And again, the government has a funny way of always, like, when things are about to escalate into that point in which bloodshed will happen, they find a way to cool the people off with some money or some new deal or whatever it is, and then keep people away a little bit. And they say, you know what, maybe our system is working better now, but it ain't working anywhere. So let's move on, shall we?
Took down your symbols and put up their own, implanted you with their religion. Have you worshiping white skin?
That's not what it is. That part is wrong. That part is wrong. So, but I can understand where she's coming from. Implanting certain ideas into the people, implanting certain political beliefs and so on and so forth, yes. But it's not worshipping white skin. Nobody's worshipping white skin. No one. So.
And then after they sucked and siphoned from the country enough, then they started implanting the leaders that they wanted, who would fulfill their white supremacist agenda.
Again, this part is wrong. If you actually know the history and you really understand what it is with Hubert Macaulay them and Tafawa Bello, I forgot what his name again. Many of them were not implanted. They were people who had the Afro something. I've forgotten what it was. A lot of them were already having this African belief of the Africans have to rule themselves. And that was the wrong, to some degree, it wasn't the best, I would say, form of leadership to immediately get into, because there was no real structure. As of that time, you're dealing with people who had this intense belief. They were almost like rebels. It's not like as if they're like people who are like, you know what, we're here to work for the good of our own government. We don't want you guys ruling us anymore. But you had people who had an intense Afro belief. I forget what it's called, Afro something. Who were becoming a threat, almost like rebels. And they decided, you know what, we're just going to hand over. And that's what they did. They handed over to people who, at that time, I don't think were ready. And then before you know it, the military decided that they were going to take over the country. And that is why we're all in this crap right now. You had hungry men who were so hungry for power taking over and then causing so much chaos. If you look at Nigerian history, you find out that it was the military that was in charge, and no country has ever done well with military being in charge. None. No country. And as a result of that, we fell apart. And during that period, you had people killing people for just speaking. To speak was very difficult. To go out, and speak to your government, or speak out against your government was very difficult. People died, families died, people were dying left and right, especially under Abacha's regime. It was chaos, it was fear. Babangida, all these people, they really did havoc to this country, to that country. They really did havoc to it. So before you start speaking, try to understand what the people are also going through. And I'm not going to sit down here and refuse to believe that the African Americans were not also going through their own pain. They were going through a lot of pain, a lot of issues. So much that was going on that shouldn't even be happening. you know? So, yeah.
Agenda. And so now you have government officials who don't give a good goddamn about the average Nigerian, because they take their money and they put their money abroad.
Yes, Abacha and Babangida were looking at you. Yes.
And they leave you there without lights 24 hours a goddamn day. Meanwhile, they got lights. I've been to Banana Island. I see what rich Nigerians live like. Speaking of which, if I were to come to Nigeria with my American mindset, I would be rich in Nigeria. Because I'm not from Nigeria and I don't have the same type of indoctrination that Nigerians have. So when...
No, Tanya. The truth of the matter is that you'll be killed. That's the thing about the problem. You will be killed. That's how it will happen. You have to understand how the environment works before you can play the game. You know? And one thing in Nigeria is, if they don't understand you, most likely they're gonna kill you. It's as simple as that.
When you start trying to say that you will come over to America and do all this, that, and bravo, because you've been trained in a different way.
No, the reason why is because they are seeing all the opportunities that are missing in Nigeria. That's why they are saying what they are saying. They are seeing all the opportunities right in front of you, and many African American people are not utilizing it. The problem is the messaging that have been sent over to places like Nigeria or certain places of Africa. They see all the opportunities in your movies, in your documentaries and all that whole stuff. But what they're not being shown is the light. Many African Americans who are working hard in order to do a lot of things. Many of them that are going places, building things, making history. Names everywhere, building things, inventing things. The media does not cover many of these things that the African American men and women are actually doing. And so when you have all that so-called negative media going to Nigeria, and they are seeing the African Americans who are wasting opportunities, living in hoods and all that whole stuff and acting stupid and sitting around like lazy bums expecting government to give them welfare and all that whole stuff. When in Nigeria you'll be starving. This is why they are saying that you guys are lazy. But they don't understand the full picture of what's really happening, which is also to some degree of propaganda, or to a degree of, I would say, just being ignorant of the whole situation that's happening in America. So I'm thinking that's what is going on here. They really don't understand what the struggle is until they come over to this land and they find out that Rome is not all it's made up to be. Rome has a lot of flaws, and once you're on the ground playing with all the rules that you were not really made aware of earlier on, you begin to understand why the African Americans are the way they are. And again, I would say this: the second generation of Nigerians that are growing up in this country are beginning to show certain tendencies that African American children are actually showing the same problem. I think that is as a result of having an easier life with no struggle, no real issue no trauma that can really put somebody on that edge of the need to succeed and the need not to go back to a life of pain. There's barely any trauma that some of these kids are going through. So as a result of that, they're acting more like how the African Americans are acting. And as a result of that, we're beginning to see it also. So it's been a product of your own environment, and to that I would say you have a point.
If I went to listen, I was in Nigeria 3 weeks before I made it over to Banana Island. And when I spoke to one of my Nigerian friends, I didn't realize how difficult of a thing that is for the average Nigerian. So don't sit there and start talking about how you would do so much different. If anything, this is the time right now that we need to come together. Instead of being in your colonial programming and mindset, instead of that, Release those shackles. Release those shackles and realize that what African Americans are doing and have done in this country is remarkable. It is revolutionary. We have changed this world, goddammit, because if it wasn't for African Americans, black people would still be in the goddamn zoo. Listen to what it is that I'm saying.
And that, in my personal opinion, is wrong. Like I said, it is a collaboration between both African American people and the white people in order to change what is going on. Many of them were also against it. They didn't like treating another human being who looked just like them, with the exception of being colored. You know, in fact, I mean, they're the ones that are colored. They're the ones that are white. We're the ones melanins. But anyway, I digress. The main issue here is this. I would say that it's a combined effort between both the whites and the blacks, you know, to make things work, make things progress to where it is today. So don't try to always give just African Americans all the credit. It's not only them. A lot of people fought for what it is today. You may have not read about it, but at the same time, I know that it doesn't go one way. Because even when I'm trying to change rules in an organization, or I'm trying to change the way things are done, and I'm currently fighting that fight, I find that I need to have allies on both sides, regardless of the situation. I need to make sure they understand every situation that's associated with it. And many at a time, it is them who have to lead that fight for me. You know, I can't go around being one man in the wilderness shouting. No, I need those allies, those people who believe in what I believe in, that are of the other side, that are willing to fight that fight in order for us to get certain things changed to an appropriate form. So, yeah, it's not just one side. It takes both sides in order to make things happen.
Listen, we are all African. My ancestors were kidnapped Nigerians and kidnapped Ghanaians. We are all African. All of us. So don't be jealous.
No, like I said again, they're not just only kidnapped. Many of the times they were conquered. If you look at the map of Africa, you find out that the empires were changing during that time. You had the Kano, the Katsina, the Sokoto. All of these empires are changing. During that period, you're changing the face of Africa. Too many empires were falling and being rebuilt. So the problem with Africa is that I don't think they properly documented what was happening back then. But there was so much war and chaos back in those days. Empires come on, empires fall. It was how it was done. And if not because I was looking at the empire this thing not too long ago, I wouldn't really have known that those things actually existed. In fact, I was so surprised how, as the empires kept on carving, and then at the end of the day, you had the British who eventually carved out Nigeria, Ghana, and so on and so forth, in order to mark up the territories away from both the Germans and the French, who were also trying to conquer Africa during World War One or close to World War One or so. So they were the ones marking those territory during those periods to come and finally create the shapes that you have there in Africa, because they were marking off their own territories. So that was how they came to be. Not just, the people were marking it out. No, those territories were marked out by the colonials who came in because they saw land, they saw oil, they saw gold, they saw all kinds of items in those lands that were not harvested. You know, Africans didn't know what they had back then. You know, your cocos, your zinc, you know, all those things that the British were already using, and they were like, oh lordy, look at all these vast amount of things just hanging around, and these people are not even using it. You know, they're just like right here. I mean, this is the time to start taking all these things away and start using it, and then that's how they carved up all the territories. So, like I said, you have all these empires that existed back and forth back in those days, and that's what happened.
Because our ancestors were stolen and yours were left back there. Did you want to go through this?
The people of Africa that were left back were probably the ones who ended up conquering your own people. But since your father is of African descent, you cannot claim to be African American. I mean, yeah, she can claim because her mother is African American, sure. I mean, I won't sit down here and deny the mother's struggle. I will not do that. But what I would say is that the ones that were left behind were actually the conquerors who ended up conquering, or who were not kidnapped, or who were not sold by family based on their situation. So they were the ones that were just, happened to just stay back there and possibly were successful. So, yeah.
This here? Did you want to? Did you want to go? Listen, by the time slavery on this soil ended, there were 600,000 rape babies on this land. Listen to what it is that I'm saying. 600,000. That doesn't even count the amount of children that were fed to alligators. It doesn't count the amount of children from backbreaking work who were never born. 600,000 more. You want to know how many rapes have to exist for 600,000 of those to result in a pregnancy? And then under those harsh conditions. However, my father was not born and raised on this funky land. He was not born and raised in the mental slavery, the drudgeons thereof that have enslaved mentally the people who are on this land. Some of them. Because many of them have risen to be able to get us the level of human rights that we have now. And still, every 20 to 30 hours, a black person is murdered by the police in this country. And then you see we got effing vigilantes out there killing black people too. Karens harassing us when we just try to live. We got your bubbas and your rednecks hunting us down when we try to jog and exercise. We got hooded men who came by, poured gasoline on the things that we have built and burnt them to the ground. And we got more hooded men who put on badges every day, gavels in their hand, scalpels.
One of the major issues I always say, in order to solve some of the American issues, African American issues, you need to have a little bit more police officers in these regions that actually look like us in those regions. But I can tell you one thing from what I know. The African American people, they are going to be worse than the white people. That's the honest truth. You might think that having a black person as a police officer, looking out for you and looking out for your family will be the best thing, but at the end of the day, they end up being the worst. The only time I have ever seen, let's just say, a situation whereby the officers are actually looking out for the people in that neighborhood is if the officers themselves are from those neighborhoods. If they are from the neighborhoods themselves and they know the people around the area, then they are more likely to treat the people who are within that area with love and respect. They're not going to go around disrespecting them anyhow because that is their neighborhood, that's their stomping ground. You feel me? So when they see that happening, there's always going to be respect. But then again, you have the new children of today who don't have any custom, any culture. And many of them don't have respect for authority. They speak to people, especially their elders, with such disrespect. It's not even a joke nowadays. So to have officers that are going to be dealing with nonsense like this, whereby families are no longer disciplining their children, is going to be even more problematic. The reason why you have all these issues is because families are not doing what they call charity at home. They're not taking care of their children to make sure that their children are right in the head before they send them anywhere or before they send them to the streets or to schools. That's the problem. That's the problem why you're having a lot of killings. Because we're not raising our children properly. We're not telling them what to do properly. And sure. Even with all of that, you're always going to have those cops who are white who just want to just do you wrong. But at least the numbers will be reduced to some degree. And if enough people complained about a cop that was acting out of hand, probably they will get that guy fired in today's society. But that's not what's happening. what is happening is that we have more and more children who are not raised appropriately, and we're asking our government or our police officers to be lenient with them when they meet with them, when those kids are not disciplined enough to know how to respect authority or how to address authority. It's just something else.
In their fingers and steering wheels in their palms. We have policymakers in this country whose forefathers wore hoods and them who still have the hooded heart. And when I say hooded, I'm talking about the Klan, baby. The mere fact that you even dream, that you salivate of going to another land, shows and tells that there's something going on yours that needs to be fixed. So rather than going off and talking about all of the things that you would do in America, please do them in Nigeria. Fix your government. Rise up. Do whatever it is that you need to do on your land. It's time that we came together, and it's like there's so many.
I agree with her on that statement 110%. It needs to be fixed in that land. Because when we fix our land, we can no longer continue to take the abuse that comes from America. There will no longer be an abuse because you have your people all taken care of on your land. There's no need to migrate over here to America. No need. Because everything can be taken care of back at home. And she's right. She's right.
People out there who are puppets and arbiters for white supremacy, puppeting racist ideals and racist ideas that they've been taught by the supremacist regime. And part of the issue is, and I'm going to say this and then I'm going to get out. I'm going to say this and then I'm going to jump off the video.
Tanya, get to it, please. Get to it.
In America, our racism is overt. They try to dog whistle it every once in a while, but it's overt. You can see from the numbers, you can see from the way black people are treated. It's overt here. Where colonialism existed, it's insidious and it's silent. You don't really know that it's there, but you know, it's like you feel like the frog in the water, where the heat is turning up slowly. You don't know what it is, but you're feeling uncomfortable. So that it's so much easier for you to sit on the internet and talk about what you would do in America, fantasizing.
All right, I think Tanya, that's it. That's so much I can listen. But for those of you guys who wish to continue the conversation, feel free to go ahead and hit the link in the video below, and then go over there and then watch the remaining part of it, because I can't continue to watch this. I think I've overdone my own time. It's almost 40 minutes in. But the main thing about it is, like she was saying, it's overt. It has always been overt. And as a black person in America, you have to learn how to stand up for yourself. You have to learn how to stand up and say, I don't give a crap about what these people think. I don't care about this. I'm going to do what's needed in order to make sure that happens. And the thing about it is that when you do what is needed, stand up for what you believe in, people are going to respect you even more. As long as you don't use the racism thing, you stand up for who you are, who your character is, you don't tolerate BS from nobody, man, woman, or child. You don't tolerate that BS, and you let them know what the situation is. I mean, yeah, sure. So anyway, guys, it's been a pleasure speaking to you guys on this topic. And Tanya, keep up the good work, regardless of what the situation is. I know you had some message, mixing some false with some true. However, I would say I understand the overall message here, and that is, don't go around judging people by what you don't understand. You have to be on the ground. You have to understand what is really happening. You have to really be in that environment to understand the shackles that's on the people, and to to basically give kudos where kudos is due, because those who have been able, even with the shackle, to do a lot of great things should be congratulated and admired. And we cannot sit down here and not say African Americans have not done a lot. They have done tremendous. They have gone places, they pushed the limit. They have done it all. I can say kudos to them. They have worked their butts. Unfortunately, many of the kids nowadays that are coming out, especially from African American families, many of them are coming from single family homes, are very disadvantaged because they no longer have that family thing going on with them. We are now one of the lowest people that actually have families, and that's a very big problem. The nuclear family is a very, 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 very important structure, and the current atmosphere is not allowing this kind of situation to continue. We have a very big disease and we need to get rid of it. We need to get to back to respecting each other, understanding our roles, man and woman, understanding our roles and what we play to our children, and making sure that our children are guided properly to where they need to get to in order to continue what we've all worked hard to achieve, and not let it go to the wayside. Many of the times people forget about the struggle, the blood, the sweat, the pain that so many people had to go through in order to get us to where we are. We take it for granted because we've forgotten what it was like to be lynched, to see somebody killed before your own eyes and know you cannot do anything about it. And I agree with you on that part, that we need not to forget the blood shed by our heroes, those who stood tall, firm, and had to bleed in one way or the other, or even get their hearts broken for what they believed in order to achieve it, and they've achieved many of it. And in as much as I can simply say that we have come a long way, we still need to go a little bit more further in order to eradicate this problem, but it will be non-existent. It will continue to exist as long as we don't have some kind of pride of our own, whereby we say this is our own country, we built this, and they themselves want to go back there, and they can't. We haven't built anything to actually be proud of, seriously proud of, to stand and simply say, hey, we are this, we've achieved this, and we've gone to this level. This is why that's the level of disrespect continues. But until we've achieved that, we've been able to build this, especially in Africa, without their influence, without them helping, and they see that our own places are flourishing, then yes, there will be respect for our own people, because they too are struggling also to go to Africa. But then again, I've spoken too much. I think the whole idea is very simple. We have to learn to respect each other, and we have to remember that in as much as Africans and African Americans may think that they're different, but they are not. It's just a series of conquered and unconquered people, or later conquered people, I would say, for the Africans, because we're colonized, so we're conquered eventually. But both sides were conquered regardless. But the main thing about it is that we're still one. We are still from the same ancestors. We're still people of the same soil. And we have to realize that, that we have to come together in order to achieve better things, especially here in this country. We cannot continue to segregate among ourselves, because some people have culture and some don't, or some have lost their own culture. But anyway, that's enough for me. Until I see you guys on the next episode, guys, take it easy. Miss Tanya, keep up the good work. Until then, have a great day. Bye.